Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, October 13th. Starting particularly late today, let's see, we've got a Duelist survey. Do we get any rewards from it? Doesn't seem like it. Oh, you're getting Record of Noble Spirits, new selection pack. New secret pack Fires of the Scorching Bonds. New secret pack Treasures of a Cosmic Ocean. Upcoming Forbidden Limited Lists updates. And even more accessories, all seemingly released at the exact same time when it just doesn't make any sense at all. Some cards are apparently being added to the featured cards in Champions of Salvation. Is that a secret pack or is that a selection pack? I'm not sure. And maintenance. Notice, that's just way too much notices. When really, immediately you're just going to go over to the shop. Let's just start with the accessories. That's easy enough to figure out. We've got what looks to me like a Halloween themed protector. Although, in general, it would probably work throughout the year. And then we have another kind of Halloween-themed projector, but in a kawaii anime art style, cutesy art style. Then we've got a icon for 50 gems. Truly, this is all just incredibly wasteful. And then, weirdly, it seems like only half of these things are time limited, and it really just, I think, further highlights how Konami just has no idea what they're doing as far as promoting things and selling things as a game as a service type experience. So we have one free pull. Let's start with this. Before we do that, let's go ahead and just check and see how many cards do we already have here. The numbers are fairly high to start with, so it's hard to justify pulling like more than a 10 pack out of this. So the reason I started late today, on top of just in general having weird sleep schedules, is when I woke up this morning, the wireless remote, 400 megahertz wireless remote for my ceiling fan to turn the lights on, turn on the ceiling fan, this thing at 1 to medium, low, or high. Apparently the receiver on that had just shorted out to some extent. Like, it seemed to me like it was still getting power and still synchronizing to the remote. Otherwise, the remote configuration and pairing program is just really poorly designed. And yeah, so I had to spend what was already waking up fairly late at let's say 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I had to spend several hours removing the wireless receiver from the circuit so that the ceiling fan and light would actually work. I just cannot be in, even in winter time when it is relatively cool outside, I cannot be in the room, in my room with my computer going. It just produces so much heat. Like, right now the fan is at full blast and I'm barely feeling even the slightest of chills, even in the middle of the winter. Which is probably to highlight that in the summer it can be downright unlivable. Now, Linus Tech Tips, or the guy who owns Linus Tech Tips, has done an interesting thing where he's moved all of his computers into a server rack and cooled it with his swimming pool. Although in that system it has failed multiple times and it is still doing the liquid cooling setup, which is just not really safe or acceptable in my opinion. And he proves that too, in that he's had leaks and he's short-circuited at least one high-end gaming PC motherboard, which, yeah, all the equipment in that, logically, you would suspect and not really want to continue using after you got it wet. And so it's just really, really high risk. We didn't get an ultra rare, so we're guaranteed an ultra rare, so we're going to spend another 1,000 gems that I wouldn't have spent normally. We should have actually looked up. So if we don't get any ultra rare in the first 9 packs, the 10th pack by default will turn into an ultra rare pack. But yeah, the suggestion I would make, if I would have redone everything a second time, is I would have put a hole through the wall and put my computer in the bedroom to the side of my bedroom, and have all the noise and cooling issue happen in there. Which doesn't work except for people who have spare bedrooms. If you don't have room for it, obviously you don't have room for it. I wouldn't recommend putting a computer in a hallway. I wouldn't recommend putting a computer in like a place that's going to be damp or not very air conditioned or cooled, like a closet. Closet sometimes can be damp. But yeah, if you could get it through the wall into a place where you're not going to listen to it and the heat's going to pour out, that is the ideal scenario. If you can if you build a computer closet, obviously, and you can hook it up to a computer closet, there are severe limitations on that idea. Like, when I say put a hole through the wall and go through it, I mean literally on the other side of the wall, because once you start getting to 12 to 15 foot, any kind of USB connector extension cord's not in spec and it's not going to work. Video cards and monitors and things like that. Potentially you have a big danger of being out of phase on power for the monitors versus the computer. So you ideally would want the extension cords and power cords also powering the monitors from the same outlet as the computer, from the same battery backup, ideally. But yeah. If I had a choice, that's what I would go for. Is first, it would be to build a computer room on the other side of a server room on the other side of the wall, which kind of could do. There's basically a closet on the other side of the wall of where my computer is, but they would be putting it. I would then have to have cooling and air conditioning in that. So we got some ultra rares that time, and we've now opened 5 extra secret packs. Yeah, and we still, as a free-to-play player, nowhere close to getting all the ultra rares are getting 3 copies of every super rare, and we are far, far past the point of getting 3 copies of every normal and nearly 3 copies of every rare. On top of having to fight with taking off the wireless remote from my ceiling fan, then I also had to deal with my macro still with this new plugin not really working the way I wanted to. Maybe I figured that out, but maybe I haven't. So I ended up just moving a bunch of tabs around for today's news. I do think at some point I want to shift things around and do the follow list cleanup after, at the end, after looking at new games. I think it's more important to look at new games first, and then follow list cleanup just doesn't really have to happen. Here we have an ultra rare here, so we're not going to end up having to spend another 1,000 gems for no good reason. And then for the accountability section, which I'm going to try to move fairly quickly today in general. Over the weekend, I'm still just working on my smart on-air light. There's a lack of polish in the Wi-Fi manager software. Like, it's and looking at the source code, it's got some problems. It could use some tweaks. It could use, I think, probably somebody new has already taken over it, but I don't know if the new person who's taken over the general idea has worked on it, or if it's more of a case that nobody new has really taken over it and the old person has just kind of abandoned it. Of course, for ESP32 programming, the whole ESP version is about to change, so all the programming I'm doing right now could be in need of immediate upgrades and fixes for perhaps better performance, which is the main issue right now. Is it's very finicky when it is in that captive portal Wi-Fi setup. It just doesn't want to move as smoothly consistently as I'd like it to, even though really I'm only calling the same function over once multiple times, and just sometimes it just doesn't work. Like sometimes it doesn't connect to the Wi-Fi, and there's not really a good reason for that. Sometimes it takes really long to load the pages, and that you just hope for more consistency, that even if it's slow, it would be consistent every time in its slowness. And some of that may very well have to do with just the underlying Wi-Fi randomness of Wi-Fi in itself. And then OBS's WebSocket is also incredibly finicky as far as its initial handshake, in that it really wants to get, I think, a response very quickly, perhaps slightly quicker than even the hardware can handle in that initial handshake before it starts to complain. Now I doubt this deck would be justifiable to purchase another 10-pack. Now, we really are at a point now, about a year and a half in, where it's not really worth it since you've got so many extra copies of rares and normals. Of course, these other card packs are probably even less of candidates as far as ones I would want to open up. And we have like 23 hours now to potentially consider any of these. But I don't think it's really even necessary to look at any of these secret packs. Because I think at this point I've just made such a good amount of progress as far as owning all the cards that no one secret pack can make that much of a difference. Yep. So yeah, I spent most of the week just running the... This one actually is a good candidate. Should I buy it now though? I'm very low on gems. Let's just risk it. Yeah, there's a lot of moving code around, a lot of getting it to work and look good, and then changing things to get it to work a little bit better. It's similar to what the experience I imagine would be if you were doing a jigsaw puzzle and you got big chunks of the jigsaw puzzle done. If you did it that way instead of doing the edges and just like trying every single piece around the edges, which a lot of people do the edges, a lot of people do pictures that line up, a lot of people do a hybrid of both. But yeah, I've got blocks of code, and now some of it, a lot of the weekend was moving the blocks of code around and figuring out how to do it. A lot of what I'm doing too is probably pretty poor programming in the sense that it is just using a constant, and like one of the constants is like, is it authorized? Has it done the handshake with OBS is WebSocket? And it's just testing for that constant and toggling that constant on and off. Which it's a little weird that there isn't a class in any programming language that I know of called toggle. Instead, you have Boolean as a class of variables, which can be true or false, and that's it. And very often when I'm using a Boolean, I'm using it as a toggle. So why not make a class called toggle just as part of the standard in a programming language that is either true or false, but every time you access it by default, it switches to the other one. So when you test to see if it's true, it then becomes false after it returns a true result. Save you one line of code in a lot of places that you might use it a lot of times. But yeah, I don't know of any language that has something. There's probably some very weird, archaic languages that do have that as a function. And inherently, that's a type def, not a class. Yeah, a lot of what I'm doing very possibly should be done with classes, but I just don't want to bother with trying to mess with classes. Trying to do things fairly quick and easy, least amount of code. One thing I did realize about the Arduino IDE as far as programming Arduino C, and I call it Arduino C specifically because it is really fairly different from standard C with the different libraries involved. But one of the things that the programming software, the IDE, lets you do is just click on the side and collapse entire subsections of the code. If you have a for loop or a while loop, it'll just let you collapse all that and hide a lot of the code, which can be certainly helpful. Like, there definitely are spots where the code is good, the code works perfectly, you don't need to look at the code anymore after that point, or at least not until you do a final pass, if you're going to do a final pass, just to make sure everything looks good. A lot of what I was doing was certainly just trying to get a good regular expression pattern in the HTML input fields. One of the things about the Wi-Fi name is that by default, if you click an autocomplete in the Wi-Fi name from like a mobile phone, it's going to add a space at the end, or it's going to try to add a space at the end in most cases, and that's not going to work. So I needed to add extra code in there to make sure it tells you, hey, spaces aren't allowed. Check your inputs. On one hand, I was thinking I wanted the code to only save to the save file once a complete authorized handshake connection had been made, but at the end of the day, it's just easier to save after information has been submitted. It does open up a small possibility that if you go back to it, your information will still look right to people and actually be wrong, but it also stops you from having just to re-enter stuff just because of something else being wrong. I did add some code. I'm not 100% sure if it's there. Yeah, I just don't have enough gems to buy this. I would potentially buy this deck. I had some code and I hope it works. I hope I can get it to work where it just scans for Wi-Fi access points in general and says, give me a number. And if the number equals 0, don't flash the flashing "you're not configured" LED on air sign. Don't go into flashing mode. This is an idea I had for safety, and it certainly could also just save some battery or save some frustration in a few rare situations, but mostly it's the idea that there would be an earthquake or a major power outage and you would be in some kind of fairly large facility and you're trying to find the way out of the building, and you would have an on-air light flashing being confused for an emergency exit. And I just wanted to hopefully try to avoid that. And it works pretty well, I think, as a concept. Because if there are no Wi-Fi's around, then you can't connect to any Wi-Fi anyway, so there's just no reason to flash the light anyways. Until more accurately, it would be until the device itself, the smart on-air sign, scanned access points and found it. Now there could be a hidden Wi-Fi, I suppose. I'm not accounting that, but you're in modern times at 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which that's 2.4 gigahertz only. And that is the next thing that certainly needs to be addressed, is that the new ESP32s need to be able to at least scan and connect to 5 gigahertz. I'm not sure they really ever will. Probably takes more processing power than you would think to get to those frequencies. Yeah, this one's a real big candidate too. But if I open this now, there's just no reason I'm not going to get everything I want. But yeah, it's highly unlikely, except for in the occasion of a power outage, in which the smart on-air sign might be running off batteries, although I don't know how long it really would last on batteries. Or some other major internet outage. it just not bothering to blink, I think, is a great idea. And it's really only one extra line of code. There is something to be said about how much all of this code really does just boil down to one line of code, because a lot of it is leaning heavily on Arduino header files and helper libraries, which is the right move to make, certainly. Decent amount of rares and normals that we can dismantle into crafting points. Of course, I'll never, at this rate, have any time to actually trying to go back and craft some things. And the Duelist Cup is just over. I didn't even make it to level 15, which, yeah, certainly I could have used a couple hundred more gems. So now it's just back to playing ranked and seeing if maybe today, and pretty much only today, since today is October the 30th, unless we got on a huge win streak, I doubt we're going to make it to Diamond today, but that would be the hope. But you know, when I say it out loud, it doesn't really feel like I did or accomplished that much. A big part of that certainly is I also was watching the new Goosebumps on Hulu, which I really got into it and then realized that all the episodes hadn't come out, and I thought, oh, well, I thought the whole thing was a mini-series that had already been released. I really like the new Goosebumps, although I question who it really is for, because it's definitely not for like the target audience of Goosebumps kids, who would be closer to 12 or 13 year olds. It's much more, I think, probably targeting 16, 17 year olds, but it's not really scary enough for adults either. For the most part, it's just taking itself very seriously, even with Slappy being a big deal, and being teased. The silliness around Goosebumps is kind of gone. One of the stories I think revitalizes a Goosebumps story that had been made into the TV series a couple times before, where it's a kid that puts on a Halloween mask, and the mask turns them into a monster and makes them mean and a jerk. Well, they turn that character into an internet troll, and then the mask turned her into a real troll, which, I mean, that just makes the story make even more sense than it was before. But I don't think that the other stories really did as much of an effect of rethinking of the general ideas, and I think Slappy in particular highlights that in that a evil possessed ventriloquist doll makes as little sense in this new Goosebumps series as it did even in the previous instances in which a evil possessed ventriloquist doll showed up. I'm kind of hoping with the Goosebumps series that there is perhaps a unreliable narrator that was going on as far as the main bad guy, like, because on one hand they really make it seem like a lot of the friends of the main bad guy were actually very friendly to him, and it kind of would make more sense if it turned out that the friends of the main bad guy actually weren't his friends and were actually bullying him. Well, I kind of have a hard time believing that that's the direction they would go. Let's see. If we come in here. I guess in general, I'm probably just looking for a twist of some sort. Maybe Goosebumps, and I don't know if it's really going to happen there. Have I been watching anything else really on TV? Or streaming TV? Over the weekend? No. But it is worth mentioning that I was also sick on Saturday, so I spent probably a lot more time than I realized just feeling ill and hot and cold. I don't know if it was eating too much cheese or because I did eat a lot of cheese and I am lactose intolerant that day, or maybe it was just particularly cold and had a bit of a fever or cold or something like that. Stop that. That. Let's go and read what this does. The spirit message card would be placed on the field of destiny. You can special summon it as a normal monster. I don't think anything stops me here, so let's go ahead and toss this one. And destroy this. Could activate this and destroy this, but I don't think I need to. Yeah, let's do it anyways. Yeah. So yeah, between being sick and watching things and still playing a lot on my cell phone with the different games, Star Trek Lower Decks, Memento Mori, got back a little bit more into playing Seven Mortal Sins, Ecstasy, and Kinkafuma. So I'm playing like 4 mobile games when I really should. You can duel during the outside period. However, your rank will not change. You will not receive any rank rewards. Are we outside the period in Japanese time already? I don't think we are. But maybe we are. But yeah, all these distractions are just making things worse and worse. Making me fall further behind. And none of it is getting me towards making, like, streaming and making pre-recorded footage, which is really what I'd like to be doing. Okay, that's not the card I was thinking of. It's no wonder I can't do the thing I was thinking of doing. But yeah. Getting very far away from like video game stuff with all this programming, and inherently my macros are going to start messing up again, and they've just never really been that stable. Websites will change, and so I'll end up having to spend more time on that. Like, ideally I would want to have 2 time-slotted pre-recorded footage series scheduled all the way up to October of next year as far as playing old games. Tell them no on that. We'll just go ahead and destroy this card just to get the upper hand for some reason. I don't think that's really going to stop the effect, though, by destroying the card. Yeah, it didn't. Inherently, there's probably a logic that needs to be thought here, in that I only decided to start working on the Smart On-Air sign as a project because of the Prime Day, Big Savings Day, and pre-Black Friday savings and sales, whereas kind of would have made more sense to start working on it in January. I guess there is a slight question here as far as that felt incredibly unfair as far as a one-turn kill. Like, if I can really get this on-air sign going before sometime in 2024, if not January 1st, 2024, that would be good for just tax reasons and things like that. Whereas if I started to release it in October of 2024, you might as well wait another couple of months and wait until 2025. Speaking of times of year, I am at this weird point where I'm not 100% sure if I remember if Halloween is the 28th of October, or the 29th, or the 30th, or the 31st. I know it's at the end of October, but I can say, as far as video game costumes and cosplayers on Twitter in particular, this is basically it. Like, I'm not seeing a lot of cosplay in particular. One of the cosplayers is literally the only person I've even seen on Twitter, and maybe that has something to do with Elon Musk and censorship, but one of them has very much gone heavy into the politics and of the Israel-Palestinian Gaza conflict, and eventually I just earlier today unfollowed that cosplayer retweeter because, yeah, even if I had agreed 100% with what they were posting, which I didn't even bother to consider, they were posting way too much, and they definitely were posting out of their lane. Like, you would be a fool to want to turn to a cosplay Twitter channel to seek out information about the war, I guess is what you best describe it as. But yeah, just the girl from Silent Hill 3 here. Yeah. It's not a terrible outfit, although this isn't really a character that I know, Cheryl Mason. I really don't know this character. I really have no familiarity with her. I'd say this looks like probably way too much makeup, particularly for a horror movie, horror character. Blood on the white shirt, but no blood anywhere else. Pockets. This all feels hand sewn as far as in the outfit goes, but yeah. I don't think, particularly when you start talking about horror characters, either you're going to have to do a very complicated outfit for the monster, or you're going to do a rather simple outfit for the heroes, because it adds to the interactive horror element of a game if your characters, your protagonists, aren't in power armor or unique outfits. The only thing I imagine you could do further to accentuate that would be to have the character woefully underdressed. And there were some mods out there certainly that touched on that idea, certainly, and it went a little too ridiculous in my opinion. But yeah, the remake of Resident Evil 3 had nude mods for the main protagonist, and full nude was probably a little too extreme there. But torn clothing, you get attacked while in the shower, I believe, at the beginning of Resident Evil 3, so it does make a lot of sense that you could have that level of vulnerability. But yeah, there's almost a split there too. Like the level of vulnerability of being underclothed or unclothed in a scenario, video game or otherwise, is being able to be cut or scratched on just basically anything. Whereas your average person tends to have vital organs and such, so shorts, sleeves, jeans, all of those things tend to give you a very basic level of very light armor around being cut and scratched. So what you probably would want to do in a cosplay like this is, even if it's not like true to what happens in the video game, or in the video game also do this, is just have a couple of cuts, a couple of scratches on the arms and the legs, saying, hey, wait a minute, this is not the best armor. So you also probably, in a story like this where somebody has a skirt, and running in a skirt probably could be a little bit more dangerous than, or a little bit more difficult than running in pants. But I think that's about as far as you can go on it, and still with it maintain a reasonable immature rating or P14 rating. Inherently, even when there are nude mods, the full nude mods just lack any creativity. Like at a certain point there, it just doesn't have the same context feel to it. Where bikini mods, I think, are slightly more interesting. Okay. We could possibly... No. Can't do that, can I? Alright, well... We'll almost win, but not fully. Suppose on the same level, like tears and running makeup is probably a good way. Messy hair. I mean, you do run into this problem where if you're trying to really embody the character and the character is trying to be realistic, having perfect makeup and perfect hair just doesn't touch on that. And you see that being a problem in general of a lot of actors and actresses, is that they don't want to contort their face to actually act. They want to look pretty in every single shot. They don't want to mess up their makeup because that would, the way it should be, realistically happen there. And that's not just actors and actors too. Sometimes it's the directors and everybody else involved in the TV and movie production, is that they are just not interested in having the characters look less than perfect. Moving on with video game news, I do still need to rush more today because I started late, and also rush because we're just looking at more games. I'm hoping that we're going to see every game that happened here, but I may have skipped over a whole bunch. I honestly have the feeling that I may have not even streamed on Friday, but I'm pretty sure I did, because it looked like there was just games from Friday even that somehow didn't get covered. So we may have skipped some. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora devs are on the crafting of their own corner of James Cameron's sci-fi universe, as an article from GameDeveloper.com if you want to check that out. I don't know why I even opened this one. Masahiro Sakurai says it would be difficult to push Smash Brothers any further than they have. Which, that Japanese phrase, it would be difficult, it basically means no, hell no. Of course, Masahiro Sakurai has been trying to get out from making more Smash Brothers for about 2 or 3 Smash Brothers games. Inherently, he tries to get out and Nintendo pulls him back in, like the mob. But yeah, at a certain level I also kind of agree with them. It's just, you look at this poster with all the characters that they've already got in Smash Brothers, it's going to be a struggle to add more characters to Smash Brothers. You can certainly add more Pokemon, but they'll be less and less recognizable characters, but you could definitely have half of all the new characters be Pokemon. You could try to bring in more of like the Punch-Out characters and Animal Crossing characters and Final Fantasy characters. But it's not like there's really a bunch of big ticket, big name characters that aren't in Smash Brothers. And then it really is after that point, if you can't add new characters, it's going to come down to just new playfields. Playfields in Smash Brothers can't be that unique or that different. at a certain point, I guess the question is, what new content can you really make? I'm not sure there really is any kind of new content you can make. Can't believe I've been missing this trick this whole time. It really goes to highlight how bad you can be at playing a pre-made meta deck from online. So you just don't understand the cards. Like, this trick, once again, though, just takes forever. First turn, by the way. In general, I guess I want to see them probably just continue to make Smash Brothers games, but not expect too much from them. Maybe just try and buy yourself some time and make it a game as a service. It really kind of would make some sense to say, hey, we're going to make a new version that runs on a new engine, say Unreal Engine 5, and potentially the graphics are going to look a lot better, but by doing that we're going to sell you a base game or make the base game free to play, and then we're going to cycle in new characters slowly with updates, or we're going to cycle in characters and cycle out characters in a free to play version of the game. Particularly for a fighting game, I could see the idea of cycling in and cycling out characters. Of course, that's what Killer Instinct tried and it didn't really work, so I'm suggesting something that's already failed. Maybe with Smash Brothers or free-to-play Smash Brothers. If they could say they're focusing on a free-to-play Smash Brothers in the meantime, it would perhaps buy them some time for there to be just a big enough difference in visuals to justify re-releasing what would effectively be the same game. Now this is interesting because this is an article from the Epic Game Store. So apparently the Epic Game Store now is engaging with the idea of writing articles to promote games and not being neutral per se. The article's headline is "Dead by Daylight is slowly absorbing the entire horror genre," which at a certain level I kind of agree with. I don't know if that's a bad thing though, because I would probably clarify it to say it is slowly absorbing the entire horror genre in the case of 4 versus 1 asynchronous multiplayer, which is a unique sub-genre, niche genre, I would say, of horror games. Like games like Dead Space, for instance, that are first-person shooter horror games, are not going to be affected or destroyed by Dead by Daylight, whereas you could easily put Isaac or Necromorphs in Dead by Daylight and cross-promote because of that. Because it is such a different experience. Yep. And inherently, I imagine in the minds of I'm just not moving fast enough here really to get all the way to Diamond. In the minds of most horror fans, I imagine there is a lot of that comic book, would Freddy be able to beat Jason mentality, or just the general, I would love to have Freddy Krueger and Jason in the same story, which is closer to what Dead by Daylight is doing anyways, because the bad guys don't really fight each other in Dead by Daylight. If anything, they kind of work together. So I don't think that inherently hurts the genre to have multiple bad guys from multiple horror series in the same game. If anything, it helps. I think horror fans in general probably have a level of suspension of disbelief already in watching horror movies that works well with their bad guys being in Dead by Daylight. This is going to be a tough one. I think we've got to go for Zeus. Just hope nothing happens there, which is a decent chance something will happen. You know by that delay that you can activate it when something is summoned or special summoned. But he's choosing not to activate it. Which means whatever it is may not be that valuable. So I'm going to skip over one guy. Go to the boar bow, direct attack character. Now we want to see if there's perhaps a delay when we attack. Yes. Can we counter predator planning? Countered that. Yeah, I think we'll probably get up one rank and then that'll just be it. Just for my own satisfaction. I just don't think it's worth it. I don't have time to play as much as would be needed to get all the way to Diamond. And it doesn't look like next month is gonna give me any more opportunity. I really wish by potentially being up one more tier, it would take me back just 5 tiers instead of always taking me back to the lowest tier of the previous grouping. Let's see. Destroying everything. Once, not twice. I'm about to drop my drink water as I'm fumbling around with it. I forgot to mention, since I did have to remove the wireless remote, and I really do need the wireless remote on my 710. It's just too much of a hassle, frankly. Or I'll fully admit maybe I'm just a poor planner or a stupid person, but it's really too much of a hassle to get up and have to flip a light switch, and then run in the dark to the bed on the other side of the room, or wake up from sleeping and have to walk in the darkness and trip over wires and things. And it is certainly also just a hassle to have to stand up and pull the chain to switch between low, medium, and high on the ceiling fans, which I honestly turn on the lights like 4 or 5 times a day minimum, probably closer to 20, and I change the ceiling fan speeds probably on average at least 6 or 7 times a day. Let's see if we can. I mean, I don't think this guy can do anything else. I don't know what his strategy is at all. Let's just destroy everything. Nope. I guess that was the right move regardless. So yeah, I ordered a new receiver, and since I was going to replace it anyways, I got another Tuya Smart Home, Smart Life Wi-Fi receiver. Really can't do that much. Like, the fact is the ceiling fan I have is old enough. It's not really that old, it's probably about 10 years old, but it's still an AC fan, and it doesn't have any special wiring for reverse, where there really isn't anything like that. So if I wanted to reverse the way the blades spin for summer and winter, I would have to always flip a switch on it. Being AC, it really can only have a high, medium, and low. There's seemingly no way to within spec, within a safe way, add extra speeds. You'd think there would be a way to do that, where you could send half the voltage or half the current or something like that, but doesn't seem like there is anything like that, and very well may be the case that the motors are just not designed to adjust for that. Let's try this trick, see if this works. So by adding potentially a smartphone connectability, internet connectability to the thing, you're really not adding that much. Not as much as you would like, at least. Didn't quite work the way I'd hoped. But yeah, it really isn't going to have anything other than perhaps some slight timers and just, hey, if the batteries died on the remote, which it still comes with a remote, I wouldn't get one without it. Like, that you have another way of connecting to it. Plus, you know, connecting to other services, which may be useful, but I don't know how many times a real person would actually say, like, hey Alexa, turn on the bedroom ceiling fan. It severely depends, I guess, on whether or not you're caretaking for somebody. I could definitely see it if you had a group of light bulbs that were just the ceiling fan lights for every bedroom, and you had multiple kids you were waking up at the same time. But yeah, might as well go smart home and experiment with it just for fun. The difference between a non-smart one and a smart one is not significant. Now the difference between buying a whole new ceiling fan and buying a ceiling fan remote kit is a big difference. Basically $30 for the remote kit, $180 for a ceiling fan with a remote. The difference there though is if you buy a DC smart ceiling fan, you're getting a whole new generation of technology there. You're getting a DC motor that potentially is going to have 10 different levels on as far as its speeds on the ceiling fan. It's going to be reversible more than likely. You definitely want to check all these specs. So you could have it automatically in the summer turn the blades one way, which is something you almost certainly would forget. Like you're also going to get possible sleep modes on the ceiling fans where it spins up, or a gentle breeze mode where it spins up and slows down a little bit faster. You're very possibly going to get LEDs in the light canopy instead of light bulbs with different adjustable temperatures and different adjustable brightnesses at much different levels. So if you hate your ceiling fan, if you have a 15-year-old ceiling fan, then where the motor is probably close to being burnt out, even at a 10-year-old, my ceiling fan is potentially close to being burnt out, I'm sure. It would be justifiable there to just replace the whole unit. And it's going to really come down to whether or not you can replace the ceiling fan yourself as to how much that's going to cost you on top of that. Because if you can find the circuit breaker, if you can test to make sure the circuit breaker and all the circuits are unpowered, you can do it in basically almost 100% safety there. But if you're not comfortable with it, if you can't do it and you have to hire somebody, then you're going to end up spending easily another $300 to pay somebody else to help you install a ceiling fan or install a ceiling fan for you. And you're very possibly going to struggle to find somebody willing to do it, because even they know that it's not something that electricians or handyman want to waste their time with. They know they have to charge so much that people don't want to pay that much. Definitely, if you're building a new house, look into some kind of smart ceiling fan. It's a shame that it all basically comes down to Chinese Tuya Smart Life connections being the best choice, just because there's so many different manufacturers competing there. It does take you away from buying like what seems to be a more common brand like Harbor Breeze ceiling fans, but I'm not sure there's really a loss of quality there. Anyways, I bet they're all made fairly cheaply. I can say that I replaced one ceiling fan with a Chinese brand Tuya Smart Ceiling Fan 3 or 4 months ago, and it has worked perfectly fine since then. Programming, maybe not completely where I'd love it to be, as far as it doesn't remember its state, which might be something to think about. Also, the more I think about it as far as my own bedroom, an uplight instead of a downlight canopy, or both, might be fairly appreciated. So I'd have to get 4 more wins to get to tier 2, and then probably 4 more wins to get to tier 1. then probably 4 more wins to get to Diamond 5. And this all ends 10:31. So I'd basically have to just play Yu-Gi-Oh! Non-stop right up to the last second to hope to get that eye. The Duel Championship quests have disappeared, so if I'd made any progress there, they probably gave me the gems automatically. And as far as logins, I'm still doing pretty terribly as far as how many days, 19 out of 31 days that I'm logging into Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not going to get any better either. Alright, let's focus heavily now on video game news instead of rambling about ceiling fans. Kingdom Hearts Missing Link closed beta registration is now open to the UK and Australia. This is a mobile phone spin-off. Which, yeah, this article caught my eye, I think in particular because we just haven't seen anything or heard anything more from that new Kingdom Hearts teaser trailer, which, in all fairness, you pretty much had to know that that teaser trailer for the new Kingdom Hearts was almost 100% ambition, and it's in pre-production, if anything, and very possibly wouldn't ever come about. Inherently, I still feel like the Final Fantasy Square Enix element being added to a RPG game with all the Disney characters actually hurts it, and I would much prefer to see Disney, if they're going to get back into video games, just become ambitious and make their own RPG game with their Disney characters and Disney princesses. I think in particular, if you restarted the Kingdom Hearts series, it seems to me like there's, in Kingdom Hearts, far too little emphasis on the Disney princesses, who are a big role of Disney and always have been since like Snow White even. It's always been a lot of female protagonists in Disney movies. And so for all the Disney princesses to be mostly sidelined for most of the story, it seems ridiculous when they should really be fighting alongside in most battles. You could certainly get away from the Square Enix protagonists, and you could get away from Mickey and Goofy and Donald Duck being wizards, as it were, and perhaps have them have some kind of magical ability more in line with them having the power of creativity or the power of friendship or something like that, instead of it just being very basic fantasy wizard references. But yeah, a full-on reboot of the general idea of a Disney RPG certainly could be helpful. And I don't think most people really would care if the Kingdom Hearts stopped making more games. Although obviously somebody's buying these Kingdom Hearts games. Apparently violent ads promoting Israel Gaza's offensive are creeping into games. Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has spent $1.5 million on online advertising to promote its response to Hamas's October 7th attack. This is from GameDeveloper.com. I suppose if this is provable, then you have to take it on the face of it. Although, inherently, it's far too little too late. 1.5 million advertising campaign in general is far too little, let alone an advertising campaign to promote a reactionary war. Like, I really do feel like Israel here was hoping that they would have gotten much closer to a 9/11 response worldwide where everybody everywhere would have supported them and allowed them to do like George Bush Jr. was able to do, which is invade a completely unconnected country, in the case of George Bush Jr. in Iraq. Which, ironically, had George Bush Jr. actually invaded either Saudi Arabia or Iran, who helped the terrorists commit 9/11, there's a decent chance that the October 7th attacks wouldn't have happened. But whatever. That would be just speculation on my part. But Israel really failing, both sides really failing to have good PR in general. I could certainly see a case where if Hamas had been this whole time putting out better, more average person friendly posts showing how terrible it is to live in the Gaza Strip, they would have potentially gotten more sympathy for committing the October 7th attack, particularly justifying it. I'm not even sure that there was a Hamas message that was sent out as far as the October 7th attack. Whereas Israel has had decades to try and get more and more people on their side, and they really fail at it. They both are just terrible at PR, and I imagine, again, I'm getting fairly political here, just highlights the embittered nature, for lack of a better description, of both sides, both sides who are people who are in charge of it, in charge of making statements and making propaganda. It also, on a good note, might highlight how people these days might just be a lot more immune to propaganda in general anyways, where even going back just to 9/11 in 2001, which was 22 years ago, there was a lot more propaganda in the minds of United States citizens to be rah, the United States is perfect and deserves to be protected completely, and had no reason to be attacked whatsoever. It took decades before people finally were able in the United States to admit that Iraq was a mistake and a boondoggle, or that the 9/11 terrorists had at least some small justification. Now, inherently, there is definitely an argument that the United States lost a lot of its perceptible soul, for lack of a better term, due to Iraq and Guantanamo Bay, which they still have yet to close, and torture and all of that. And it, in the long run, probably hurt the credibility of the United States way more, 9/11 did, than the actual physical damage to the Pentagon or the loss of life. Not that those weren't horrific, but in the long run, we probably caused way more deaths and had more deaths of US soldiers due to reactionary wars. And that's why it's important to move on, to learn history and understand history and question who is telling you the history, because they may not be telling you the full truth or the truth at all. As far as violent video games being in video games, I mean, terrible, not the target audience, just really terrible thought in general. The question, I guess, would be, what platform is even letting these ads play through? I imagine it's probably some of the worst ad platforms available. Apparently it was in Angry Birds, Alice's Mergeland. Like what advertisement platform would even have allowed this? In general, like, I don't think Google ads or Apple ads would have allowed this in general. Now, I'm a little surprised that we aren't seeing entire games being taken down from the Google Play Store and Steam and the Apple Play Store for potentially just having inappropriate ads in them. It definitely highlights that there's room for new flagging, certainly, as far as this game contains violent ads or pro-war propaganda or pro-violence propaganda. Like, there must have been some other middle ad service, like Scopely, I think is one of them. Although, I'm not sure if they're the ones being involved here. And that's a great example of GameDeveloper.com really not doing enough research and telling me, hey, what ad platform is here? Particularly if I'm a game developer and I want to say, hey, I don't want to sell ads or do business with a ad platform that would take money from Israel and take such a small amount of money from Israel to run propaganda. It seems like that would be a crazy business decision and not something I would want to do business, not a company I would want to do business with. Moving on, Destiny and Marathon developer Bungie has laid off staff. Bungie is the 4th PlayStation developer to be hit with layoffs in the month of October, which it really is make me wonder if PlayStation isn't just straight up thinking of taking its toys and going home and just giving up on the PlayStation as far as second-party developers and first-party developed games, and really just being a platform for third-party games until it finally just gives up in general overall. With that new PlayStation 5, maybe that's the last PlayStation that will ever be designed. By the way, I heard that even if you buy a new PlayStation 5 with a disk drive already installed, maybe the new slim ones with the disk drive already installed, you still need an online handshaking to activate it. They may very well have just gotten to the point where all physical pieces of hardware require an online in the initial activation, which, yeah, it's still very questionable how many people can't get online for a second to activate their hardware. Although preservation is going to be a real big problem in the future when the servers are shut down. Yeah. There's also been recently reported cuts at Naughty Dog and Visual Arts. Video Games Chronicle is doing something very weird here, asking between 2017 and 2023 which year is the best year was better for video games, which seems like just an odd comparison. I don't think 2017 was the year that the Switch came out. 2023 might be the last year for Switch, but it's also just not even like 5 years, it's 4 years difference. Of their list here, you have like Resident Evil 7 coming out, and Nier Automata, and Cuphead, and Persona 5, and Prey, Super Mario Bros. Odyssey, and Breath of the Wild. A lot of these games have lasted a lot better, particularly the Nintendo ones. Like, relevant today, Breath of the Wild, Odyssey, Nier Automata, Resident Evil 7, whereas Horizon Zero Dawn, not so relevant. What Remains of Ethan Finch, even Cuphead, not really that relevant. PUBG, still relevant. Prey, not really that relevant. Persona 5 will stay relevant. Whereas 2023, in comparison, you have the sequel to Tears of the Kingdom, and clearly this is where they started with, because they wanted to compare. You've got the Breath of the Wild Zelda, then its sequel, you've got Mario Odyssey, and then you've got a 2D Mario in Super Mario Wonder to compare to. But there really is no comparison between Persona 3 and Baldur's Gate 3, or Persona 5 and Baldur's Gate 3, or Prey and Alan Wake 2, or Starfield. Starfield, I think, is about at 50% on Steam now in reviews, and I don't think that many people are playing it anymore. Diablo 4 is a mess. Street Fighter 6 is not getting a huge amount of support. Noticeably, they've jumped all the way as far as the Star Wars Jedi games. They missed the Star Wars Jedi prequel to Survivor, whatever that was called. RE4 is good, Spider-Man 2 is good. They've also skipped Spider-Man 1. So it really is just comparing apples to oranges, and none of it really has any meaning or relevancy at all. Let's see. Modern Warfare 3 PC trailer specs, preload, and launch times have been published. This is from Video Games Chronicle if you want to check out that article. And then let's see, shift keys. Don't need to really talk about. This was an interesting picture in that the National Video Game Museum for Halloween showed off this presentation of the original Super Mario Brothers movie and what I think are the actual costumes from the movie and other props, which, yeah, that definitely is more of a thing, certainly, than I've seen the National Video Game Museum actually put photos of as far as what they have on display. Some of these look like records and advertisement pieces, whereas some of these definitely look like they are actual props. And you can see the actual props are behind glass, whereas just painted wall decorations. It's important to remember the National Video Game Museum is not that old of a museum, and it is more of a hands-on kids museum with an arcade in most of the pictures I've seen around it. So to see them have more delicate items on display is a good thing, because it really highlights that they are actually in the business of preservation. There's always the slight concern that the National Video Game Museum, or any video game museum, would just secretly be an arcade and just trying to get quarters out of kids more than actually being committed to preserving the items. Or that there's also the other concern that the museum would fail and then all the items would just be sold off to a collector, or sold off in pieces, or destroyed, which would be the worst thing possible. That is yet again a preservation thing. YouTube Gaming said, "Do you want to play a game?" on October 28th, which, in fairness, I think is a decent thing to post. And it's at least in style. Not that the Saw video games, Saw 1 or Saw 2 video games, are easily playable or relevant at the moment, but Horror Billy the Puppet from the Saw movie things is relevant in video games relevance. Then they're putting out a Minecraft people doing a thing there, and they're mentioning Luigi's Mansion here, which, yeah, none of those are terrible things. This is terrible. Reply if you want to hear a scary story. This looks a little too creepy. And it seems like YouTube Gaming retweeted somebody who's perhaps a little too scared. You have to really question what age group they're even targeting on their Twitter. I don't think they even know. I heard the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was PG-13 and thus very poor because of that. there might be room there for a rated R cut or director's cut, but even at that, I bet the Five Nights at Freddy's movie isn't that good. Bayonetta was being promoted by Platinum Games, and so for its first year anniversary of Bayonetta 3, and they're doing a fairly weird thing in that they are just retweeting a lot of stylized arts of Bayonetta, adult Bayonetta, which none of which I think particularly lines up with the way she's depicted in Bayonetta 3, but whatever. It's something. It does certainly point to the idea that they are not 100% abandoning Bayonetta as a character and just never mentioning her again. They even did a little giveaway for engagement stickers and stuff. I don't even know what these are. I assume these are something that you display. It looks like they slide into some kind of base as an acrylic silhouette display. Not really a silhouette. So that's good news, at least, because the creator of Bayonetta left Platinum Games and they aren't just erasing him from history and erasing Bayonetta from history as such. Then I still follow Myst and I'm obsessed with Myst. Apparently the original copies of the Book of Tanai, which is one of the older Myst books, included a map of Tanai, which is a little weird to have a map of Tanai. Book of Tian. But yeah, this is the cliff or mountain that is supposedly in the fictional Earth of Myst that leads to a deep hole that eventually connects down to Dunny, this underground city slash country. Although even in this you can see that the path seems to be incredibly linear, more than it's ever depicted in any of the games. And here you can see it being same picture being framed. But yeah, kind of impossible to really see a lot of detail here. You just see slight paths, and that's about it. Alright. So moving on to the regular news, this is where I put things all back around because the settings on the new plugin I'm trying to use still I don't think are quite right, but I think I may be getting there. Let's go ahead and go to Steam because that is the important thing to show off more at the moment. Steam Scream the Revenge between October 26th and November 2nd is, I assume, a sale of some sort. We've got some free rewards we can claim. Steam Deck Ghost. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be able to afford a Steam Deck anytime soon, nor do I think there are going to be any like refurbished ones on sale before at least January. I think we'd pretty much gone through all of this, and I think my general thought was that most of these horror games look slightly discounted, but not really that much, and this is one of those non-sales that is happening before a actual big Steam sale, which will probably happen for Black Friday, November, fall, effectively. Let's go ahead and pin this tab. As far as games, let's see where Starfield is, if we can find that, if they're even in, if it's even in the top 100 at this point. Let's see. Lords of the Fallen is 99. Satisfactory is 97. Is Starfield way above those or way below it? Sea of Thieves is 80. Fallout 4 is 65. That would be a comparison. Binding of Isaac Rebirth is 63. I can see Binding of Isaac Rebirth jumping up and staying higher once it gets online co-op. But I could also see it kind of just staying where it is. It is very much a niche game, so even being in the top 100 is a major success, in my opinion. Stardew Valley is 35. It was way here at the top. So Starfield is in the 26th position, and yeah, let's see if we can click on it and get a general idea. It is 67.86% rated by SteamDB, which equals 68.4% by Steam's reviewing system. And let's see, for the week it's staying fairly steady, but for the lifetime you can see it peaked at 330 at launch, and then by the 28th of September it was down to 137th. It launched on the 31st of August, and at that point it just kept going down. Whereas the 26th it was down to 52,199 players. Now, is that all-time peaks or 24-hour peaks? You'd think that would be 24-hour peaks. But yeah, my point, I think, is well shown that Starfield is not being received well. Meanwhile, we have the finals playtest jumping high up, and we have the finals playtest by a different label. Interesting, jumping high up. You have a fairly sharp drop in Apex Legends here. I still haven't adjusted this to be non-logarithmic. And then GTA 5 is low, and then everything else is fairly low. I imagine it's more of a case that the pattern is going to be just low for a lot of games as new games come out, and as people get away from their standard staple games and move into trying new things. They also may just in general be busy around the Christmas holiday. Now, weirdly, this chart still seems to be doing a fairly decent job of depicting everything, every single day of data we've gotten. 9/16 still is the first day, which I keep expecting it with every new stream to turn into 9/18 and just start scrolling in that direction. Is there anything interesting or new here? City Skylines 2 might eventually show up on the charts if it has a consistent and growing fan base. Alright, so that's going to bring us to Video Games Chronicles articles. Spider-Man 2's creative director confirms Wolverine exists in the same universe, which, okay. Marvel's Wolverine was announced in 2021. Still hasn't come out, which I guess isn't super surprising. That it's probably going to come out in a year or two, I would guess. Capcom says it has a major unannounced title planned before March 24, which I guess that's an announcement for an announcement. Let's see. Nintendo reportedly patented a dual-screen gaming device that can be split in two. Okay, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. Inherently, looking at this, I don't see anything that implies that the Joy-Cons concept, because right now you've got a Switch with one screen that can be split into three pieces, so it wouldn't be that much of a difference to make a dual screen device that can be split into two pieces. I have wondered if Nintendo would embrace folding screens instead of dual screens that can be split in two. The problem, though, is scale, because this could be that these are the new Joy-Cons, and the new Joy-Cons just have a touchscreen element to them, but they're not really designed to be the thing that you're looking at. Or this is a new Nintendo dual screen to address the one type of game that really can't be played on the Nintendo Switch at the moment, which is DS games. Not that there's that many DS games that people really couldn't port or would even want to play. Let's see. Yeah. Almost certainly, I wonder if this is just a frivolous patent that has nothing to do with what the next Nintendo console is going to look like, or if this is just a red herring. In this case, you're seeing what looks very much like a controller with a screen on it, which this is a different patent, which I could see the Joy-Cons going in that direction, although inherently, if Nintendo does go in the direction of no analog sticks, people are not going to be happy about that, but Nintendo might be very happy about it, because then no longer do you have the stick drift problem. You would just have players with a worse controller input system pressing down on the screen manually. Of course, Nintendo has done a terrible job as far as making what effectively would be cell phone games, where you do have soft input. So yeah, I don't think this is a good idea, particularly this oval shape. It's not a good idea. There's just no grip there at all. You're going to drop your controller like crazy if it's an oval shape. I'm not 100% sure that this is a good idea. The idea of being able to fold over two screens to protect the screens is an intriguing one. I bet a bunch of kids did scratch their Switches, although wouldn't be surprised if it's not that many. I did hear one of the reasons why there isn't an OLED version of the Steam Deck, which again, they probably should just release a Steam Deck too, is because the Steam Deck runs in a 40 Hz mode, 40 frames per second, or a 60 Hz, 60 frames per second mode, and there are no LEDs available for purchase anywhere that run at 40 and 60. And 40 and 60 is a weird one. You would think it would be closer, you'd want closer to 40 and 70, or 80 even, if you were going for that idea. The general idea being, hey, if you want a stable 30 frames per second mode, you go into 40 hertz mode, and then there's 10 extra frames always overhead to overproduce and overdeliver on, making a very smooth 30 frames per second. But then to limit everything to 60 frames per second and potentially drop down to 55 frames when it's chugging doesn't address that same issue. So what that tells me more than likely is that there will be a custom screen on the next Steam Deck whenever the next Steam Deck is made that probably will try to have closer to a 40 and 70, 40 and 80 frames per second. I doubt it's going to try and go much higher than that. There's still a lot of internal component improvements and tweaks I think that could be made to the Steam Deck. Whereas this, I have no idea what this is. Almost certainly, I'd bet money though, this looks nothing like what the next Nintendo console looks like and is announced. This may very well be just a concept of one device being able to connect to another device, which inherently that's all this is if it's two detachable devices, then you've effectively just made two devices that can connect through wireless connection of some sort, which we've had that all along, where kids could have had a cell phone and another cell phone, and then the games could have interacted with each other. It's just nobody's programmed it that way. And certainly this is a gimmick. Before I move on, and Nintendo leans far too heavy in its gimmicks. And last thing the next Nintendo console needs to be is yet another gimmick that drastically changes the types of games that actually work on the platform. Although this may not change too much, you may just end up finding that a significant number of games just play on one screen or just mirror the image on one screen. In the 4 or 5 years, if they released a game console like this, I wouldn't be surprised if that's very much how it goes. Now, I have said, in fairness, that we probably should have some kind of scroll bar or touchscreen input for menus and item selections. There's just so many items these days, so it's not a terrible idea if these were controllers versus being entire screens for your main view. But yeah, I bet we never see this. Let's see. Kazunori Yamauchi says a big Gran Turismo 7 update is coming next week. I don't even know who this person is, but I guess he's involved with Gran Turismo series. Alan Wake's creative director wants to make a, quote, crazy huge budget dark gothic fantasy game. Lake appears in Alan Wake as Alex Casey. I guess his name is Lake. Sam Lake is the creative director. Inherently, though, isn't that the problem with Remedy in a nutshell? Is that A, they push everything so it's crazy huge and huge budget. Yes, it would be slightly different if you did a dark gothic fantasy, but at a certain point I think almost every Remedy game going forward has to be tied into the same universe, so it's going to be somewhat limited because of that. Now, I haven't heard any reviews for Alan Wake 2 per se, although I hear I think DF Retro said some nice things about it. I haven't heard a full review. But I definitely have heard that technical performance and even like a 2080 may struggle depicting Alan Wake 2, which this would be the first game. Thank goodness I don't actually want to play Alan Wake 2. But it would be the first game where my graphics card may not even be able to do 1080p 60 on it. And that's regrettable. I am definitely not interested and not desiring to buy yet another video card, yet another upgrade anytime soon. And I don't want to play games that are going to try and push that. And that's Remedy games in a nutshell, is that Control pushed the ray tracing aspect. If Control had been released without ray tracing being a thing or being mentioned, most people would have forgotten about Control after a few weeks, instead of mostly having forgotten about Control now. People generally remember what Control is, but nobody's playing it. Nobody is really clamoring for Control 2, even though we'll probably get one. The gameplay was very lackluster. The story was weird, but not really complete in Control. And so I'm hoping that gameplay is a lot better in Alan Wake 2, and the story is a lot better in Alan Wake 2. But even at that, I still don't know if I would really trust Remedy to make yet another crazy huge budget game, this time in a dark gothic fantasy setting. We already talked about Kingdom Hearts Missing Link, Super Mario Bros. Wonder leapfrogs Spider-Man 2 in this week's UK physical charts. When did this article come out? Because this may be an older article. Some of these may be very old, and all these articles may be out of order. The Dead Space trilogy story producer said he would, quote, redo Dead Space 3 almost completely. Chuck Beaver says the changes didn't gain a new audience and lost the old one. That definitely is the appropriate response to say there, although noticeably I doubt there will be a remake of Dead Space 2, even if it was fairly easy. And even if it was fully remade of Dead Space 2, I doubt that they would put the funding into making and redoing Dead Space 3. It is pretty obvious that the only reason Dead Space 1 got remade is out of pure spite, and I just don't think that the owners of the Dead Space series are going to have enough spite to continue to remake the Dead Space series and reboot it effectively to try and continue it. Although it really should be done. Clearly, even after Dead Space 3, they should have said, alright, well, that was a misstep. Let's just try to rush along and make the fourth game and continue to have a series that is competitive against Resident Evil, whereas Dead Space has that promise of being a competitor to Resident Evil. And look at how terrible some of the Resident Evil games are. They don't stop making Resident Evil games, they just move on. They make the next thing, and they make the next thing, and it works for them most of the time. Like a zombies in space, necromorphs in space game should be the direct competitor to Resident Evil as a series, and they should be trying to catch up as far as just the numbers even, and spin-offs. Yep. But obviously that's not happening, and I doubt it would be. But it's at least good to hear them paying the right lip service to say, hey, they would remake the Dead Space 3 completely. I could see you remaking like almost all the story and just even keeping most of the gameplay scenarios, and it's not like the actual gameplay is that terrible in Dead Space 3. Although inherently there's something in the co-op where the second player in Dead Space 3 sees completely different things, so I very possibly have only seen half of that game because I wasn't playing co-op, which that's weird. We already talked about Smash Brothers being at its end of life, or end of development effectively. Apparently Microsoft has started blocking quote-unquote unauthorized Xbox accessories. The update here says Microsoft has said that unauthorized accessories can compromise the gaming experience. The thing here though is that clearly this is just them trying to make more money and take a bite out of third-party accessory manufacturers. Because if you were going to make a cheat device, you would start with a regular Xbox controller, and then you would just wire directly to the inputs in the circuit board, or at least you would have the Xbox controller chip to authorize it. But yeah, this is arguably maybe a grounds for a class action suit, but I'm not sure if it really would get that far. Because inherently, like, it would have to be the manufacturers of third-party controllers saying that Xbox and Microsoft is being a monopolist and interfering with their business and suing them. Now, noticeably, as soon as they got that Activision Blizzard merger through, all the nasty things, they had this whole list of let's be evil as a big corporation is always evil, ready to go as soon as they got the Activision Blizzard merger happening. And it is no coincidence that all of this is happening now. But I also imagine they wanted to do this before Christmas. Which, yeah. Again, though, if you're going to make a cheat device for console gaming, getting around this is going to be very, very easy because you have physical buttons for everything. It's just a simple relay. It's an on-off switch for every button input. So you can just wire directly to the solder pads, to the connections, to the copper on the circuitry for A, B, X, Y, and all the other inputs effectively. And then you could add any kind of extra chip and circuitry to cheat on top of that. So this really is going to only stop the cheapest of the cheapest unauthorized accessories. Noticeably, I imagine this means there's less likelihood of there ever being any kind of connectivity or compatibility where you can connect a PlayStation or an Nintendo Joy-Con DualSense, DualShock type controller to an Xbox, which I would much rather see Nintendo go or Microsoft go in that direction and allow them to allow players who like the PlayStation controllers connect to a Xbox Series X and play it. Just play your way effectively. We'd already talked about this article. We already talked about that. Let's see, we already talked about that. Bungie has reportedly delayed Destiny 2's next expansion and marathon, which, yeah, if there's job cuts, delays probably are also going to happen, but maybe the delays caused the job cuts, you never really know. And then Remedy has released its first Alan Wake 2 patches, is looking into an Xbox audio issues. Fixes for bugs and visual issues have been addressed on the game's first update. That's going to bring us to the Komatsu articles. Let's see. Persona 5 Tacticia has a protagonist trailer. Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 for PS5 launches February 16th. Ghost Knight A Dark Tale demo is now available. Little Nightmares 3 The Necropolis 2-player co-op gameplay walkthrough video, I guess, is available. Disney Dreamlight Valley launches December 5th alongside its first expansion, no longer going free to play. Zhuan Yuan Sword Mist Beyond the Mountains for Switch launches December 8th. Missing Link launches in 2024, and they have the teaser trailer. See, this is just like a whole different character you're playing as, too. Last thing you need is yet another character in Kingdom Hearts. Of the Red, the Light, and Ayakashi Suzuri launches February 29th for PC and Switch. see what that looks like on Steam. Looks to me like it's a visual novel. I'm gonna put that on the following list. See, when I opened that tab, it opened it in kind of a weird position. Not really where I expected it to go. Let's see. Dragon Ball The Breaker Season 4 launches November 1st. Level 5 opens a 24th anniversary website. The developer of Dark Cloud, Ni no Kuni, Yokai Watch, and more turns 25. Although notably, I feel like Ni no Kuni as a game in particular was very much a bait and switch Japanese RPG game that tried to use the visuals of Studio Ghibli that Studio Ghibli was involved with in the first game and tried to sell it like it was a lot more than it actually was. Whereas the Yokai Watch games I don't think have ever been particularly high quality. And looking at even the animation here, I'm not seeing a lot of interesting visuals or character designs. It is very much a soft color palette and kid-friendly cartoony art style. Let's see. Everlasting Flowers has added a PC version. We have a link to Steam. No. They're also adding traditional Chinese language support. Release date to be announced on November 7th. So an announcement for an announcement. I assume this is a visual novel of some sort. Roots of Pasha is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Switch on November 28th. Then the Xbox Series and Xbox One in 2020. I assume that this is a farming game of some sort. Yeah, it doesn't look terrible, though. There might be something to the idea of being a farmer in a kind of caveman times, caveman culture, or a native culture even, versus being a farmer in modern times. Particularly if you're doing something like Stardew Valley, where you're a farmer in modern times and yet you still don't really have tractors or heavy machinery to help you, which, yeah, there's a night and day difference between having tractors and heavy machinery versus hand growing a garden. The Retro Games Challenge 1+2 replay launches February 22nd in Japan. 404 Game Reset is going to end its service on January 5th, 2024. This is a mobile RPG game being shut down less than a year after service. Is this the Sega game? I didn't even know it had been announced. Follows the story of a player who lives in a country distorted by Sega and must fight against them in order to restore the world as it was. Famous games appear in the form of beautiful girl characters, and since launch collaborations with Sega, Bandai Namco, SNK, Taito, and Capcom, and more have appeared. Yeah, this is that game. I didn't even know it had come out. This was the one that just never made any sense at all as to what the idea was or what was going on there. Well, this is not showing me anything interesting, is it? Clearly, the idea was to somehow take the brand names of Sega games like Afterburner and turn them into anime waifus who would sell in some kind of gacha game, which we've seen this happen before in a couple of Japanese companies where they've tried very hard to turn what would have been a fairly old game into a more anime waifu style character or personification. Bomber Girls is an example of that, and at a certain level I think it works, but only at a certain level, and probably not at a profitable level as far as a mobile gacha game goes. Inherently though, there is a slight difference between Bomber Girls, which is to take the idea of the fairly low polygon ugly Bomberman character and then replace him with several different anime girls, who versus putting Afterburner and just turning Afterburner into an anime girl instead of making a new Afterburner game and just adding characters to that game, which that is the smarter move here. Certainly would be to re-release or remake or make a sequel to games like Afterburner. Throw in some characters, however you animate them, to make them interesting and relatable and human feeling. But you hurt it completely when you have a weird game title that doesn't really explain itself well. I've never seen an ad for this, although it is Japanese only, so I guess that makes a lot of sense. But it didn't even succeed in Japan, so even the Japanese audience is not buying into the idea of a gacha game from Sega. And inherently this also shows where Sega's head is at, is that they want mobile games that are as close to pachinko parlor style gambling that make the most amount of money possible with the least amount of effort. And I'm glad it didn't work out for them. Like, I don't generally throw out opinions like that, but in this case, this was a dumb idea that was not followed up on, was not pushed, was not promoted, and I'm glad it didn't just turn into a cash cow to subsidize Sega so that they can continue to make bad games or make no games at all while milking a fandom that is really just getting older and older. And it definitely is a case, I bet, in Japan that the higher amount of Sega fans that would particularly have relevance to things like Afterburner would be fairly old, to the point where the anime waifu thing probably doesn't mean anything to them. Like, you're probably targeting closer to 50-year-olds with Afterburner, not 20, 30-year-olds who would still be into that. Moving on, Honor of Kings World, adding some mischief to the battle gameplay trailer is available on Komatsu. And then a Quantum Error launch trailer is available if you want to check that out. And this week's Japanese game releases: a new Xbox Series S 512GB starter bundle. Interesting. And then several games: Mugen Souls, Mugen Souls Z, Mugen Souls Double Pack, My Time at Sandrock, Star Ocean: The Second Story, WarioWare Move It, Model Debut 3, Fashion Dreamer, several, but not really that many digital only games also. Increasingly, we're seeing fewer and fewer digital only games. I say that I think every week now. It's just digital only alone is not happening. Perhaps it's maybe a post-pandemic thing in Japan where people are more willing to go to stores, and thus people are forcing are releasing physically too. The game Dusk, which this is probably a remake of or a remaster of a very old game, is coming to the PS4 on October 31st. That brings us to video games, GameDeveloper.com articles, and see, that's the tab I opened there, where it decided to open the new things. So I have no idea why. Yeah, I talked about Xbox is gonna block third-party accessories. Inherently, unauthorized third-party accessories may also include the accessibility controller, had the accessibility controller not gotten into business with Microsoft and become a second-party developed device. Honestly, I don't even know if you'd really call it even a second-party developed device. We talked about Destiny or Bungie employees being laid off. Crytek wants Hunt Showdown to avoid live service sequel problems. Live service without a sequel. Yeah, every live service wants that. It never happens. At some level, you're going to have to either have a live service that goes on forever, like World of Warcraft, and doesn't very much grow, like World of Warcraft, or EverQuest is very possibly even a better example, although I'm not 100% certain on that. Or you're going to have sequels, and then you shouldn't be doing live services in the first place. And I would have to figure out first, though, whether I even care about Hunt Showdown to go any further in this article, though. And at the moment, I don't, so I'm going to move on. Embark Studios, The Finals, uses text-to-speech AI for in-game voices. Embark Studios has apparently explicitly used AI-generated voice lines instead of hiring actors. We'll almost certainly hear more stories like this as we go forward. And it really is just going to come down to people's personal opinions. At a certain point, if you believe in capitalism and that people should have jobs, this is probably unacceptable and you should boycott the game. If you believe that humans should be taken away from work and that they should just be given some kind of universal basic income and be allowed to enjoy life instead of having to work when their labor can be replaced with just as good AI, then maybe it's not that big of a deal to you. Inherently, the need for capitalism to exist and the need for individuals to work is decreasing as we go further into the future. Some people always will want to work, some people may always need to work, but not everybody. Not really. We've honestly never really had a case where what a traditional job was described as needed to be owned by every single person every single person of certain ages needed to have. It's been very much the case where wives and mistresses were not expected to work a day in their life, and yet their needs were provided for to some level. It's always been the case that rich children were not expected to ever work, and their needs were provided for. So it's only becoming more equal if more and more people potentially can live that way too. And that leaves people potentially with more time to play video games. And yeah, it's also arguably not that many kids that I've ever heard that say they want to be voice actors in video games. That's not really making video games when kids say they want to make video games. It's probably equal to about the same amount of people who are in theater, as far as kids in theater. Like, that's a very small percentage as far as people who want to show off their talents. Or even if you added all the kids that are in theater and all the kids that are in, say, choir, that's still not a large percentage of the entire graduating class. Moving on, the Biden administration ordered an AI safety analysis and labor market research. This was an executive order concerning artificial intelligence use in the U.S. will likely inevitably reverberate through games in the near future. I haven't done any research into what this executive order really does. It sounds to me on the face of it like he has just told people to look into it, which at a certain point, making an executive order to look into something is really just pretending like you're doing something. Whereas government agencies should already be looking into the effect of AI. Like, the second AI became spoken of, the National Labor Review Board should be investigating it and should have reports ready to hand the Biden administration years ago, months ago at least, but probably years ago. And now a real executive order should actually do something a little bit more effective. Let's see, divided into 8 parts, the executive order calls for new safety and security standards for AI, such as requiring companies to share safety test results with the government and helping Commerce Department create a guidance for AI watermarking. It also calls for guidance to be made for evaluating AI privacy techniques. One of the bigger demands is a report on how AI would affect the larger labor market and exploring how the federal government could support disrupted workers, which inherently the government is starting from the first thought of supporting disrupted workers, which eventually that support will be withdrawn, versus stopping the corporations from disrupting workers in the first place. The executive order has also called for collaboration with the international partners to establish larger AI standards for around the world. Yeah. It's probably a pretty toothless executive order, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. If they straight up made a law saying AI can't be used in anything, it really wouldn't affect most people. If they made a law that said AI can be used in everything, it still probably would take 5 to 20 years before it affected a lot of people. But at least they're pretending to do something, or looking like they're doing something. Then we already talked about violent ads. And see, this is where I want to move the follow list cleanup away. Is I want to put this at the end after looking at the new games, which that I don't think worked anyway, so we're going to immediately move into all the new games on Steam. That being said, the macro today just kept going, so whatever marker it was using seemingly disappeared, and I wonder if maybe I need to make 2 markers, which wouldn't be a terrible thought. I could look at the most recent link and the second most recent link and just make sure the links that I'm going back to don't equal either one of those. That's an easy amount of code to actually do also. Meanwhile, we're going through these new games, and I'm not sure that there's too much to say about these games. Last week was pretty wild on just the high amount of adult games in general, but particularly Japanese looking adult games. And I wonder if this week swings in the other direction. We shall see, I guess. Some of these are going back to the 27th, but these look like things that I hadn't looked at, but I'm not 100% sure that really is the case. As I got closer to games that I know I'd looked at that were earlier released, that it got easier. So on the 27th we have this As far as the release date, this game called Monster 2, which is 2D anime ladies with cat ears. Yep. Looks to me like it's a visual novel. 2 different girls. $4.49. It says it has English and Japanese full audio. There's a character named Lucy. And there's a character named Grace. So, yeah. Still not 100% sure it's a visual novel though, but yeah, I would guess it's a visual novel. The Monster 2 probably is meant to be translated as Monster Squared. Or Cat Girl Squared would make more sense. And then we have yet another adult game called Melon's Milkshake: Lewd Soul. Which, if I was to guess here, this is just a simulator with more of a 3D CGI lady on several different contraptions being hogtied in several different ways, or tied up in several different ways. I guess technically not hogtied. She's got several different crazy micro bikinis that they're putting on her. But overall, the game looks very visually unpolished. And it's selling for $2.24, English only. Yeah. Then we have another adult game called Lines Garter, which is one of these games that I think we can show off here, in that it looks like it's probably just some Massive Flip characters in some Massive Flip first-person shooter experience. The only difference is the skirt's a little high, and that's about it. You can see it's already mixed reviewed. So I imagine that this game, while it is in the adult section, probably doesn't really have as much adult content as you would like. In fact, the game itself says it only has 10 minutes of fast gameplay experience per game, selling for $7.99. English, French, German, and Spain, Spanish, and Russian are the first few languages being mentioned. We have a baited Hickory 31 going, why is this in my feed? If anybody could answer that, it would only be the Google algorithm and nobody else. Welcome, I suppose, is the right response to my video game news with some Yu-Gi-Oh! At the very beginning in the first hour live stream. We're looking at all the new games that came out on Steam and which ones I want to turn into YouTube Shorts. So perhaps you clicked on a new and trending YouTube short and that told the algorithm you would be interested in watching my live streams, or perhaps you watched one of my live streams, or perhaps you watched one of my pre-recorded footage videos in which I cover a specific game and do a long play and talk over that. Or perhaps you've clicked on nothing of mine and you just clicked on or watched other things on YouTube and the YouTube algorithm thought it was something you would be interested in. That's about as far as I can go and speculate. Now, I don't think I'll say anything about Pumpkin Ghost. It's all over the place as far as a game goes. Just a whole bunch of different gameplay mechanics. Dreadfall doesn't look visually polished enough. Here we have Prince of Zevon, which is tagged with sexual content. It's one of these RPG maker games where maybe you get some toplessness. Maybe. $10.39. It's way too expensive. Scorpius. Looks like an asset flip game. Long Time No See has a different art style to it. Interesting. Give that a chance. Make a YouTube short off of that. Necro Attack. Yeah, there might be something here. Here we have Secret Photo, which looks like one of these Chinese games where they asset flip and have Chinese 3D CGI girls in somewhat revealing clothing, but not really revealing. English and Chinese only in language. $4.99. Nothing there. Apollyon River of Life. This looks weird enough that I would do something with it, but it's already on the follow list, so I guess I'll just leave it on the follow list. Well, actually, this was released in 2021. This is one of my follow list cleanup tabs, isn't it? Okay, well, it's not relevant enough. Like, I can't put it on my wish list because there's not 30 people willing to review it since 2021, so yeah, I can see why I would have given it a chance, but it's been given more than enough time now, and so it's gonna leave the follow list now. Yep, and since the tabs are just all out of order, we may run into more follow list games as we go through. Hopefully I don't end up making too big of a mistake, but worst case scenario is I just make a YouTube short on a very old game. Yep, here we have yet another adult game, Cuckold Chair Simulator 2023. We've got 3 CGI ladies. Interesting, there's a hot dog in one of the screenshots, and like, I've never seen the idea of phallic-like objects being used as a visual gag. What's weird about this is it's a chair simulator, they say, and there's literally not a chair that really takes any prominence here. It's calling itself an idle clicker. It's $3.07. It says it has English full audio. Yeah, and I just don't think there's enough of a game there for the level of quality I'd like to see in adult games. We can say no to The Last Commander. Seems like it's 2 different gameplay mechanics. A missile defense game and then a strategy board tabletop game. Let's see, Police Heroes. Looks like it's a Survivor clone, but it doesn't look like it has quite enough visual polish to say yes to it. I like the thumbnail though. Although it is also weird to have like police heroes be the heroes in a zombie apocalypse, which is what it looks like. Although, in all fairness, that would be a decent story to tell, is to say, hey, here's a real emergency and here's a real police officer who actually did the right thing in a real emergency. Like, you get so many bad cops in movies and television. It wouldn't hurt for there to be an occasional good cop, but very quickly it feels like propaganda if you do tell a story like that. This Dread Haunt might be some kind of horror game worth mentioning, so I'll give it a chance. World War II Z is nothing. a fool's art gallery. Doesn't look like anything. Here we have yet another adult game. This one is Horny Teachers Want to F the F word. 3D CGI ladies with a much more decorated like background, I would say. Several different backgrounds. There's like a nurse's office, there's a schoolroom, there's a library. I'm not sure if you ever see the male protagonist. It doesn't inherently look to me like a Japanese college or a college in general. It definitely feels more just like a high school, which I think there's definitely some weirdness there. Like adult teachers, even if engaging with other teachers is a little inappropriate in a school. I mean, it's inappropriate in any work environment to run around sleeping with each other. There's some real collarbones on this lady, which looks very weird. Apparently this is also a VR game. It's a $17.99 VR game with no audio. It doesn't seem like it gets particularly wild either. It definitely is one of those things that where I guess the fantasy of doing it in school is fine, but it does have some creepy undertones, certainly. It would be like the equivalent of making out on your child's bed, teenage child or even younger child's bed. We have another Backrooms game, which I'm not willing to give Backrooms games any amount of my attention at all. But man, yeah, it definitely seems like we're still seeing a lot more adult games than we were before. Love Love Candy is the next one. This is more of a cartoony western style 2D game, very pink. All the characters seem to have gigantic like double G breasts and big old booties, so you're definitely gonna have to have a fetish for just anatomically impossible ladies. I feel like this may very well have been a real mobile game that has just been ported to Steam, because the interface definitely feels like a mobile game. Although weirdly, it seems like there's only 3 girls in it, whereas I feel like a mobile game would have more than that, and it seems like it's a match 3 game for the most part, and then you unlock dresses for the avatars. It says there's only 15 scenes in the whole game. So they're asking for $7.19 for a mobile game, which seems like they're asking way too much. English full audio. Here we can show you the 3 ladies, as it were. In that cartoony 2D art style. Yeah, they're definitely asking way too much for that. But I do want to see mobile games come over to Steam if it helps improve the adult section, which is still a mess of really bad games. Which the non-adult section of Steam is also a mess of really bad games, but there is a much bigger balancing force of good games there. I think we can say no to Crystal-ish. Screenshots there not really showing me anything. No to this. Let's see. Some kind of collection of very simplistic games. That's going to be a no. Rescue cables. It's too simplistic of a puzzle game. Grill on wheels. Nope. I don't know if a mobile food truck really could do a great job being a grill. Seems like that would be very smoky and potentially dangerous. I feel like grills need to be stationary when in use. This doesn't look like anything. The Unknown Fear seems to have a lot of dark screenshot syndrome and just nothing going on. Retro Combat. Looks like nothing. Crow Forest New World. Looks like nothing. Still getting a whole lot of nothing. That's where I really need to learn to just say nothing. Just move on to the next game. Save my voice. Burn through looking at all these games. Give this one a chance. Here we've got a hidden object game. Pretty much at this point, I think I make so many YouTube shorts that making hidden object game shorts is not logical. It's just competing against itself. I make too many YouTube shorts anyways, and I don't really have a way of fixing that. Like I really don't know how you would make one of my YouTube shorts, which are automatically made, and convert it into two, where I talk about two games in one minute amount of time. Nor do I think that would even really be better for YouTube and search results. I'll give this a chance. Here we've got a non-adult visual novel with a lady with big boobs. I wonder if there's a patch somewhere for a game like this. $13.59. Says it's Japanese full audio. Classic visual novel about a workplace romance. Contains some nudity and sexual content, but apparently not enough that they felt the need to be in the adult section. I almost would prefer if Steam and Valve started to name and shame games and say, hey, maybe not as much try and name and shame, but say, here's a list of games that on second review we found needed to be put in the adult section. We'd like people's feedback if you feel like we did this in error. I don't even know if Valve does that though. I don't know if Valve cares or checks at all. Here we have another adult section game with the 3D CGI characters, Sophia's Spa, which yeah, it's another one of these. These must be incredibly easy to make visual novels. Just posing people and then writing probably some very simplistic stories. Now, one thing I'm noticing about Sophia's Spa is there is quite a lot of ladies topless in the same room at the same time, seemingly just sitting around for the most part and hanging around. Whereas normally you'll see 3, maybe 4 people in a room. It's fairly weird to see 6 or 7 standing around talking to each other in particular. Sophia's Spa is $6.79, and it is English only. I still heavily suspect that these these games are incredibly, incredibly short. It's also worth mentioning, it says the game, quote, for now, or parentheses, for now, has no video and no audio. Next we have Brooks in Wild West, which is another 3D CGI character. They're trying to make specific characters reoccur, which is an interesting twist on it too. Noticeably though, this is less polish on the backgrounds and less of a really theme. At some point the characters start dressing up in cowboy and Indian cowboy and Indian style outfits of modern times. Although Indian, Native American, First Nation outfits being shown here look pretty much just like loincloths. This is also one of the guys who are just extremely long, which I'm not sure if most men want to see 15-inch long members. $9.95 English, Portuguese, Brazil, and Spanish, Latin American interface and subtitle languages are supported. Moving on. Killing Bullet doesn't look like anything. Whispers in Paradise doesn't look great, but I'm gonna give it a chance. Are we anywhere close to the end? Probably not. Let's see. Labyrinth Theory looks like nothing. Phantom Rose 2 Sapphire is already on my fall list. It's being pretty well received, but I'll leave it on the fall list for a little bit longer and consider it later. Spooky Tower doesn't look like anything. They are coming. This is probably a great example of where pixel art just does not work for the style of game. And it definitely doesn't work when you have a green character in green armor and then green grass behind you and then green zombies. It's not good color palette. Probably help if I actually showed you. Yeah, green character with green background, green characters who would blend in if it weren't for the splatter of blood. This doesn't even look like a video game. No to that. Probably gonna say no to this too. Honestly, even if you made an amazingly good 8-bit, 16-bit platforming game, that 8-bit pixely or 16-bit pixeliness just isn't going to work. You're going to have to look to art styles that are much closer to, say, a Super Mario Wonder. Next we have a game called Venus Puzzles, which is not actually in the adult section, but I think it probably should be. It's $1.39. English, French, Italian, German, Spain, Spanish as the main interface languages it's mentioning. And it is just a slide puzzle with 2D anime girls in revealing bedroom poses, perhaps not showing too much more than side boob, but still showing enough that it really shouldn't be outside of the adult section, since it's the main focus. Next we have yet another game that is in the adult section, Sex Story Cuckold Life Episode 9, which if you liked episode 1 through 8, you'll like episode 9. 3D CGI characters. This time it looks like several people are getting together in some kind of strip club for $2.39, English only on the interface. Let's see, Crazy Cursed Grandma's house. It's gonna be a no. Spooky Dwellers. It's gonna be a no. Here we have another adult game. Man, I swear we were getting about a third as many 2 weeks ago. And pretty much from January. We have a 2D comic book style, cartoony, maybe European animation style game here called Jerry Wanker and the Quest to Get Laid, which I assume this is a parody of like Leisure Suit Larry. The only difference here is I suspect that this is a UK based creator. And there is something, I guess, to be said about the level of art you could see in the original first Leisure Suit Larry was very, very low resolution, very low pixely depictions, whereas modern games can really just show it all, and it's going to be up to your own personal taste as far as how much you want to be shown. Yep, this definitely looks like a point and click game, which inherently means it's a real game. In the adult section, it is 100% positive with 10 user reviews already. And this is exactly the kind of thing I want to see, is just better quality actual video games, not just simple slide puzzle games in the adult section. People actually trying to make an interactive experience that makes sense instead of just selling what could have been sold in a different format. I'm choking and coughing and losing my voice here. I've got that tickle in my throat. As far as the languages, Jerry Wanker supports for interface and subtitles English, German, Spain, Spanish, Russian, and simplified Chinese. I imagine it very much is a case where there would never be voice acting for this game. It would be too expensive. And certainly I think you can make a game like this and censor it slightly to go up to a line for comedy purposes and creative purposes, and you might get a bigger audience. I think there's more of an audience that wants to play Leisure Suit Larry style games if they were censored than there is people who want to play Leisure Suit Larry games when they totally aren't censored. To the point where I think a lot of people suspect that Leisure Suit Larry games are censored and that it is just up to that line when it really isn't. Let's see. No to that. Meowing Point. Find hidden cats. No. Doma. No. Finite state automation challenges. Yeah, I think no. This looks like this is trying to teach some kind of programming or mathematical or physics science concept, but it's depicted very, very poorly. I think this is going to be a no. Got another RPG Maker game, it looks like. That's going to be a no. I wish there was somebody out there that could say the best RPG Maker game per year. If you could even show me just like one game that was made an RPG Maker that was actually worth playing, I would feel better. Otherwise, you do get into this very weird situation where it feels like you could make the statement that Steam would be better if just all RPG Maker looking games were removed just by a very arbitrary AI visual recognition algorithm. This is an interesting idea, being buried alive in a casket. Is it VR? Nope. It is something also that would be difficult to film or talk about, or depict otherwise visually. Usually you could write about it, but yeah, we'll give that. Even if this is an acid flip horror game, they've taken their limitations and thought, what can they do with those limitations to make it make more sense? How can they work well within those limitations, I guess is a better way of saying it. Let's see. Here we have another 2D anime girl visual novel called Faculty. Looks very nicely drawn. Looks like there's some bondage fetish stuff too. $3.59, English and Russian. Weird. Weird that would look so anime and then not support Japanese, but not that weird because, let's face it, this anime style is incredibly popular in Russia despite the Russian government not wanting it to be popular, and ripping it off in Russia is also very popular as far as the art styles and such. You can see 3 different endings with these 3 different characters. Let's see. The Void Miss. This was a game that was announced a long time ago. Remember, it was nearly 6 months ago at least, if not a year or 2 ago. A LiDAR horror survival game. Back when LiDAR and automated driving cars were being talked about a lot. It's just now coming out. Well, it is very positive, so I can put it on my wish list, but I don't think I'd make it another YouTube short or even a first YouTube short on it. Particularly since YouTube shorts tend to be delayed by so much. Vindictive Drive. It's gonna be a no. The House. It's gonna be a no. Paper Dash. Ghost Haunt. It's gonna be a no. Shrieking Darkness. Yeah, there might be enough visual polish here to say yes to that. We'll give it a chance. Phoenix Initiative. It's gonna be a no. Necromancer's Arena. We'll give it a chance. Almost done today. Enemy Trench is going to be a no. And then Super Eternal or Sempiternal. It's probably nothing. I'll put this on the fall list, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. Then Frontline. World War II is another fall list cleanup game, I guess, from January. Yeah, I definitely just don't think I'd ever play a strategy war game, so I'm going to remove that from the fall list. Just my own personal opinion. So that normally would bring us to the end of the show, but there's some other fall list cleanups here we can look at. Here we have another 2021 game that, yeah, it's positive, 80% positive. Does it support English? Yep. Yeah, I'll go ahead and put this on the wish list. Although I very possibly will never buy it. Gangs of Sherwood still needs some more reviews. Gangster Underground, the poker in 2020. This is a VR game, free-to-play game. You know what? In these cases, it really just makes sense to add it to the library. If it's free, even if it's a VR game, just add it to the library and be done with it. Now I own Gangster Underground the Poker for free, but I could only play it if I spent hundreds of dollars on VR, which I probably never will do. This is September of 2022, and it only has 21 reviews, even though they're 100% positive, which I think justifies removing that from the fall list. And then this is still new. So that's generally what I'd like to see happen, is to be able to do the fall list at the end. That also opens up the possibility that if I'm running late and going long, I can just say, forget it, I won't do the fall list, but I'll have spent my energy more wisely looking at the brand new games, which are more important than looking at the fall list to clean up the fall list, which it really doesn't need that much focus. Alright, well, I baited Hickory31 never responded, so I wouldn't be surprised if he just commented and left, which is a thing certainly you can do. It's better than leaving immediately. Comments and interactions are weighted as positives in the YouTube algorithm, as far as I understand it. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.